Hello, one and all. Welcome back to another brand new episode of the Rocker Dog Podcast, where we talk to musicians about their dogs. I'm your host, Tim Dill, and barking in the background at every delivery person who comes to my door is my best friend, Charlie. And today we have on the show Spencer Hazard of the band Full of Hell, who'll be taking their brand of unrelenting metalcore to Australia and New Zealand starting on August 14th. And these are Spencer's wild-eyed rocker dogs.
We have Ernest and Kiwi.
Okay. And how old and what breed are they?
Ernest is a year and a half, and he is a Brussels-Schnauzer mix. And Kiwi is a Brussels Petit Brabançon.
Interesting. Ernest right away has those just arresting eyes, or eye, I should say. He's got that one blue eye.
Yeah.
And does he have a story? Did he come from a Serbian rescue?
Yeah, so he was purchased from a breeder. Like, a breeder purchased him from Serbia and brought him over, and they didn't end up breeding him or wanting anything to do with him. So they were like, if anyone wants this dog for free, come and get it. And essentially, I was on tour. My wife texted me and was like, look at this dog. No one wants him. And I was just like, fine, whatever, just get the dog. So she had to deal with him for the first month while I was on the road.
Okay. And why?
I just think it was another situation, just like breeders getting dogs and then being like, I can't do anything with him. He's not purebred kind of thing. So that's why I think they were just he was kind of pushed to the wayside.
Right. Okay. And I'm sorry, he's relatively new to you?
We've had him for about 6 months.
Okay. And where does Kiwi fall in this timeline?
Kiwi was my wife's dog initially. She got Kiwi and another Brussels rescue named Plum years ago. Kiwi's 13 at this point.
Oh my gosh.
And essentially, like my wife jokes around, it was a buy one, get one free situation from a rescue. She got Plum, and then they were like, well, Plum's bonded with Kiwi. Kiwi has to come too. And they were both so small that when she went to go pick them up, they were both in a cat carrier together.
Right.
So Kiwi's only, she's 13, but she's only, I think, 4.5 pounds.
Wow. Small.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had Jay Weinberg, the drummer now for Suicidal Tendencies. He's got two Brussels Griffins. He's always posing with them just in his hand, so they are quite small.
Yeah.
And I hate to bring it up, but you recently lost a dog. Did you lose Zoe recently?
Yes, my parents, when growing up as a kid, my parents always had wire hair terriers growing up. So when some of my first pictures of me as a child was with a rescue they got named Tucker, who was a wire hair terrier. Tucker passed away when I was in kindergarten. Then we got another wire hair terrier named Sonic, who I had from the time I was in kindergarten up until I think he was almost 17 years old when we finally had to put him down. And they were just super high strung dogs. So my parents started getting Frenchies from then on. And first one we got was Ozzy, who he lived to about 13 and a half, and we had to finally put him to sleep last year. And then we got an old English bulldog after that named Louie, and that was one of the best dogs I had ever owned. But we knew people down the street that had a bunch of French bulldogs, and they ended up having puppies, and they were like, you can just have Zoe. They were like, you can just have her for free. And we had Zoe. When she finally passed, last week or 2 weeks ago, she was 11 or 12 years old, but she was showing signs of a stroke, and they took her to the emergency vet, and she ended up having a brain tumor. So we had to put her down.
I'm sorry to hear that. Now, where does Hogan fit in?
Hogan was my parents got after Louis had passed away. Louis like I said, he was an old English bulldog. He was probably the best dog. I think my parents got him when I was like 19 or 20. He was honestly the biggest bulldog I had ever seen in my life. And most people had saw him were just like, I have never seen a dog with that big of a head before. And he ended up like, I guess my parents, he was acting weird and they took him to the vet and he ended up having cancer as well. And so after he passed, they were like, let's get another old English bulldog. And that's when they got Hogan. Hogan's about, I would say, 3 or 4 at this point.
And Hogan seemed to be, speaking of big dogs, you had a picture of him at 3 months old at 25 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I like people like there's English bulldogs and then there's like old English bulldogs and like
Hmm.
old English, I don't know what it is. They're like you think of just like a standard bulldog, but you see the old English bulldog and they're like twice the size of a regular bulldog. They're like in between an American and just like a traditional English.
Hmm.
But they're just like like and you can tell that they're going to be massive because it's like when they're puppies, their paws are gigantic.
Right. And you mentioned that Louis was such a great dog. What made him, so memorable?
He's probably one of the most loving dogs we had ever had. Like when my parents got Ozzy, we had like been going through a tough time. Like my mom's twin sister had just passed away and we got Ozzy and that ended up becoming like my mom's dog and she was very bonded with him. And then once Louis came in the picture, and yet again, he was another dog from a breeder that was like, he had a small bone deficiency and that was it. And a breeder was like, I can't do anything with him. Someone just come and take him for free.
Right.
So me and my dad drove all the way from Maryland to Indiana just to pick him up in like the snow. And we were like, we can't let them get like do anything to this dog because it's like, I mean, you do hear horror stories of like breeders just being like, I can't do anything with the dog. I'm just gonna put it to sleep or give it away, whatever kind of
Yeah.
thing. And we ended up just like we got him and he had a little bit struggling when he was walking as like a puppy. But once he hit like 1 or 2, he was perfectly fine. But yeah, he was the most loving dog. He was just like very personable, like had very, his personality, everything about him. It was just like me and him bonded very strongly.
Yeah. Since Kiwi has such a long relationship with your wife, do you feel Ernest is bonding with you more? Is that more your dog, quote unquote?
So my wife Olivia, that's his mom, but then he sees me and he's like, "Oh, that's my brother. I'm gonna like, he's my
Right.
plaything," and she's the one that's like, "Ernest, you need to calm down." She's the stern one with him, and I try to be like, "Ernest, whatever," but he's like, "No, we got to play right now."
Yeah. That's funny. It's very much like a child relationship with their parents. Because I know I'm tend to be the activity dad, and my wife tends to be the keep everyone in check.
Yeah.
And currently, you're kind of, I don't know, if, are you living on a farm or you have just farm animals on your property?
So essentially, my dad has a construction company, and he needed a warehouse to store his like construction equipment on it and he built like a small apartment into the pole barn where he keeps all his like tractors and like forklift and stuff like that and it was like a cheap piece of land outside of the city and they were like let's get some chickens and they bought a couple chickens and they ended up being like a lot of fun to take care of. So then eventually we grew it way more, and my wife's like, I want to get some goats too. So we have 3 goats. I forget how many chickens, a goose, and we had 2 guinea hens. Unfortunately, one of the guinea hens got out and something got it. A couple like we had a very rough week with Zoe. We lost a guinea hen, then Zoe, then a chicken the day after. So
Okay.
it was a rough week for animals.
Is there a tough learning curve to this? These new animals, these chickens, the goats.
I feel like a lot of people see goats and think that they're dumb animals, but they're like very intelligent. Like they know their names, they know like repertoire, like they know when my wife are like trying to feed the chicken, so they'll like sneak out and try to steal the chicken food from us and stuff like that. They're very smart animals and very easy to like they're kind of like an animal like we make sure they're fed, we make sure their pen's cleaned the only thing that we have to do with them that can be kind of strenuous is getting their nails clipped, but that's only like every 3 to 4 months.
Hmm.
So for the most part, they can pretty much take care of themselves besides us feeding them and changing their water and stuff. The hardest part with the chickens is teaching them their bedtime, which like can be very, very stressful when you think that they're all in bed, but then we're walking Ernest at like 10 o'clock at night, and then you hear like the goose in the yard screaming to wanting to go to bed kind of thing. But for the most part, after you like can break them of that after a couple months, and now they all know it's like they wake up at 7, they go to bed between 8 and 8:30 every single night.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. I think I'm such a advocate and proponent for dogs and the well-being of dogs. And, since starting this podcast, I became a vegetarian. You just kind of open your eyes to the wider scope of the animal population and their place on this earth. And I think more and more people should realize that these animals do have characteristics like our domesticated pets do. They do have personalities, they do have intelligence, they do have wherewithal to, survive.
Yeah. And that's like a thing me and my wife talk about all the time. Like we would love to go vegetarian, but my wife is allergic to every single thing that is like she's allergic to soy, she's allergic to beans. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
anything that's a substitute she legitimately can't eat. Like she has to have some sort of protein. And it's like it's not like a peanut allergy or anything. It's she's allergic to like legumes and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand how that's tough. Funny enough, though, back to the chickens for a second. So many times, I get so much of the information on artists and their dogs through their social media, and so many times I see these posts of being away on tour and missing the dog. Yet you have a picture holding, I think it's with a chicken, and it says, "Gonna miss the chickens while I'm gone."
Yeah. Um, and that's another thing too, like going with the goats, like people think that they're like, they think they're farm animals, they think that they don't have personalities, but it's even with the chickens, like, yeah, some of the chickens are just chickens. They go do their own thing, but some of them have their own personalities. Like a couple of them know their names. We call Sandy. We say, "Hi, Sandy." And every time we say that to her, she lays down on the ground for us to pet her.
That's awesome.
And there's a couple of them we tell them like, "Come here," and they'll like run to us and let us pick them up and stuff.
Yeah, that's very cool. Another thing, it started kind of as a joke for me, but a lot of times when I get these, heavy metal or metalcore or hardcore, is this juxtaposition between the personality of the stage person and the tenderness of the dog lover.
Hmm.
There's such a great contrast. And oftentimes I would say, again, kind of half jokingly, is the dog on brand? Is the dog on brand to, the band? Which, is kind
Yeah.
of hard to say it's not. But, in preparing for this interview, I'm not quite sure I understand, and I don't want to get the wrong genre, but let's call it metalcore.
Yeah.
Does metalcore come from kind of the same ilk as maybe punk and hardcore, where you're railing against what's being spoon fed to you by society? There's a bit of unhappiness, rage with just how, and it goes, I guess, to one of your merchandise. It goes to how your merch says, "Man will always fail."
Yeah.
Can you give me the 101 course on the philosophy of the music? And what I want to do is bring it back to the animals. Does your compassion for animals kind of speak to the flip side of it?
I mean, I feel like it could come off for me as hypocritical because I'm not a vegetarian or vegan or
Right,
anything.
right.
But with like the man will always fail, like, and bringing it back to animals and stuff, it's like, I mean, people fail animals all the time, whether it be dogs or whatever. And it's like we've been friends with bands in other punk scenes where their whole identity is helping pit bull rescue and,
Right.
having songs about animal abuse. And I just think, in turn, with punk and hardcore and metal and grindcore, there always is a straight lineage to like animal welfare, whether it be, like I said, I'm not vegetarian, but there's a ton of bands that we're influenced by that are very outspoken vegetarians and vegans, or animal like advocacy and welfare, and it's just like going back to of being like the pitfalls of society, like that is like a very big part of our personal identity as a band of just like, I mean, look at all the stuff that we're seeing on the news with multiple things of war going on right now and unjust things in our own country. And it's just like a lot of the stuff in our music has to go back to personal stuff with drugs having a
Hmm.
very damaging part to our families and stuff like that. And just like religion having damaging effects in a personal scale and a widespread scale. I know that it's like I'm making being kind of like vague, but it is kind of vague, and it also does like umbrella so many aspects of different stuff of like I said, of whether people be wanting to help people or wanting to help animals. It all kind of like comes back to like one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you see kind of a lack of compassion when you look at the negatives towards man.
Yeah.
Man is his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Man claims to be top of the food chain, most evolved, when their actions are anything but.
Yeah.
And I know animals aren't perfect. I know the nature of an animal sometimes is barbaric, but you can look at them and say they're a lot more pure in intention a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's another thing too that goes back to is like animals that you don't see pure in intention with like dogs and stuff. That is like either managed out of them or managed into them to be aggressive and stuff like that. Even with like the chickens and stuff, it's like people even use those for entertainment of like cockfighting and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It all comes back to just being like, yes, there are good people, but there are also bad people in the world that then in turn make animals bad.
Yeah. Now, what is happening? I know art can be viewed many different ways, and everyone has their own interpretation. But in your eyes, what is going on the cover of Coagulated Bliss?
That, because a lot of the lyrics are very much based in like personal struggles within the band and stuff, whether it be like family dealing with jail time or drugs. And we told the artist Brian Montori, we were like, make it as experimental and avant-garde as you
Hmm.
possibly can. And just take our lyrics and use those, but keep it in a frame of we're from a town called Ocean City, Maryland,
Yep.
and a lot of the art is centered around that. So it's like people think that's like an eagle on the front. No, that's like a seagull. Like, that's
Okay.
that. And I think it's just it's his viewpoint of our singer Dylan's lyrics of like I was essentially my takeaway is it's like almost like someone on the cover is like their internal like struggle of like what it feels like with like addiction and stuff, and then like with the animals and stuff a representation of the area we grew up with.
Okay. In the context of looking through your social media and seeing the chickens and seeing you were saying the seagull,
Yeah.
I was going somewhere a little bit more vengeful.
I mean, maybe I'm not sure. Like I said, we kind of gave him like carte blanche, and like that's another thing that we've kind of been struggling with the cover is people see that it's so experimental and multimedia that they've been like, oh, that's AI. And it's like that's not AI.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're just not used to someone like in this day and age, I guess, trying to do something more experimental.
Yeah. Well, like I alluded, I end the show with 5 questions I call the Zoomies because they're
Okay.
supposedly fast and frivolous. The first one is, do you kiss Ernest and Kiwi on the mouth?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I'm sure they're cleaner than humans.
I'm glad to see more and more people are answering that with a yes, because early on in the show it was kind of 50-50, but the last, probably the last half dozen shows, it's all been yes. Do Ernest or Kiwi, and actually this can go to any of your dogs, but did any of them have a particular theme song?
Not necessarily a theme song, but Kiwi loves when I play guitar. She
Hmm.
will like push open the music room when I'm playing guitar, so I always bring out guitars for her and play for her. Ernest is a little standoffish to guitars still, but that's one thing I do every time I get a new guitar. If I know it's going to be my favorite, I'll put it on the floor, and if Kiwi comes up and sniffs it and wags her tail, I know I'm going to like that guitar. If she doesn't, I always end up selling it a couple months later.
No way. That's awesome.
Yep.
Question three is, if the dogs went on tour with you, which I know they don't, and this
Yeah.
again, this could be to any of the dogs, what would they insist be on the tour rider?
Ernest will pretty much just eat anything. He's one of those dogs that's just like, if it falls on the floor, you better get it quick. Kiwi, she has a little bit of stomach issues, so she would definitely make sure that we had boiled or grilled chicken on the rider.
Very fancy.
Yes.
Question 4, do you use a dog voice to speak to your dogs?
I mean, probably, but it's probably unintentional. I don't realize I do it. I'm sure I do.
Okay. Do you ever give a voice to your dog? Imagine what they would sound like.
No, but looking at Ernest, I'm sure like seeing his like he has like Victorian haunted child eyes, so I'm sure he would have some sort of like Oliver type voice.
That's great. I can see it. I was hoping you were going there. That was great. And last but not least, is there a dog organization or service that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Unfortunately, I do not. If we do anything, we try to do stuff locally, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Okay, no worries, no worries. And back to the band, Full of Hell. What does the rest of 2024 look for you guys? Any big plans?
I'm sitting this tour out, but the rest of the band is going to Southeast Asia and Australia. Then once they get back, we have a couple more festivals we're doing. One called Furnace Fest in Alabama and New England Metal Fest in Worcester, Massachusetts. We got another tour at the end of the year, but we haven't announced it yet.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that. Spencer, thanks for giving me your time and taking me through your dogs. It's always a pleasure to hear more about these dogs I see on social media, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. Thank you.